Hello and welcome back to Everyday Writers and another one of our Author Spotlight bonus episodes. I'm Crystal McQueen,
I'm Jordan S. Keller.
and we're so excited to welcome Wes Blake to the program. Wes Blake is the author of Pineville Trace, winner of the Etchings Press Novella Prize, and finalist for the Feathered Quill Book Award for a debut author. Pineville Trace was featured on Deep South Magazine's fall/winter reading list, and Wes has been called a writer to watch by Pulitzer Prize finalist Lee Martin. His work has appeared in Electric Literature, Los Angeles Review of Books, Story South, Louisiana Literature Journal, among others, and he holds an MFA from the Bluegrass Writers Studio. Wes, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate it.
So while I was writing Pineville Trace, it felt like I was in a dream. And I think for me that came across because the scenes are like so short and concise, and each moment felt like a camera snap. And we're both curious, what made you decide to write a structure like this novella in Flash? And if there were any obstacles you had to overcome while writing in this kind of structure?
That's a good question. So the first part there, why did I choose to write in that? And first of all, thank you for I definitely can relate to your sense of it being like a dream. There's so much about visions and even like there's a part where it's kind of like the fourth wall is broken and the author has a vision, and then there's the main character Frank following this vision. Should I give a little synopsis for listeners that maybe haven't read it yet? Would
Yeah,
this
Yeah,
sure, please.
give a
don't
bit of
spoil though.
Okay, no spoilers.
I'm
Yeah,
not done
so
yet.
folks, that's a fantastic question. But the book is Pineville Trace, and it's my debut book. And as your question points out, importantly, the form it's a novella, but it's made up of flash fiction stories. So, 1,000 words or less. Each one is a standalone is the goal, and they add up and tell this story about this former faith healer that walks away from this minimum security prison in Eastern Kentucky in the 1970s, and he walks away with this stray cat that he's named Buffalo. So that's the gist of it. But to your point, why did I choose to write that? So that it's kind of a long answer. I'll try to make it pretty brief, but in short, I love the form, and the I had been wanting to write something similar to this form for a while. I have on my iPhone in my notes, I have a writing notes, and I kind of have future projects and things I want to work on. So the exact I actually wanted to write I've written a lot of creative nonfiction essays as well. I wanted to do a creative nonfiction collection in micro flashes, and I still have that goal. But that was where my first idea for this kind of mixed form that told an overall story, and I wanted that collection to kind of tell an overall and a continuing story that was singular, but added up within the individual pieces. So I had that on my brain. I read this fantastic book, and if anybody's listening, you should run to wherever you buy books and buy it. And I know that I know for sure you can get it on Christopher Chambers' website. So if you just Google Christopher Chambers, but Christopher Chambers is a writer that writes flash fiction, and he's a fantastic writer. And he has a book that influenced me the most, and he has a newer one, but it's called Delta 88.
Hmm.
And so to answer the first part of your question, I read this book. Honestly, I read it over the period of a year, and I read it very slowly, and I loved it. And like it was a flash fiction collection, but it was kind of like Gurney Norman's Kinfolks stories, where there was there was a voice that continued through every story, and there was the meaning accumulated over the stories, and I love that. I love that combination of having that flash story, yet it's adding up to something else. Kind of reminds me of the best concept albums, like Willie
Hmm.
Nelson's Red Stranger or something.
Mhm.
And so, anyways, that was the why. And so, were there obstacles? Yes, it was that form. And actually, Chris Chambers and I did an event in Wisconsin. We talked about this. But the really the constraints of form were both an obstacle and an inspiration for the writing. So, and we kind of talked about how constraints, are important, and that's what really helps you create something that's singular. And So yes, I really did. You have a roadmap, but where each one has to stand alone is a little bit scary going into it. Each morning, and this is Queek right here. I can't have a book about cats and leave them out of here. So say hi there, Queek. Um,
Cats are always accepted,
Always a guest.
just so you know.
right. Also, well, you're famous now, Queek. And Pig might come in too, Pig the cat that's mentioned. But yes, there was this fear when I was writing that, maybe each moment you kind of have to reinvent it and you kind of have to almost start over in a way. And so but that I like that. That was a challenge that I think made me kind of rise to the occasion and forced me to be creative and to follow my intuition a lot. In this book, I feel like a lot of the things that I saw that were there, I did it. They were almost subconscious, and I think the form led to that. It's a great question.
Well, you definitely have a whole lot of description. Like your prose is just very beautiful. The setting, the scene, you're very much in there. But I really want to ask you about KY 190 because throughout the entire novella, it's all flash from Frank's point of view, except for
Mhm.
one section at the beginning. And so, can you talk a little bit about what your narrative choice was to include that in the book and how it actually like rounded out your story?
Good question. So I was actually there earlier this week. We were just chatting earlier. I just went back for that place, that Pine Mountain and Kentucky 190, that highway that runs through Pine Mountain, was really a big inspiration for this book. And so what I wanted to include it, there were a couple things there. I wanted to include it because there was a strange a coincidence that happened where
Hmm.
while I was driving, this is the middle of nowhere, it's rural, and this is in the book. I saw a car very close to the model of Frank's 1959 Buick LeSabre that is his car throughout the first novel in this book. And so that was bizarre to see a car that old and that rare. It's rare to see one of that model. To see it there was very strange. So that was part of it. That was part of it. And the idea for the story was so much inspired by that place that I wanted just to show that. And I was talking about the subconscious and intuition really being a big force in the creation of this. And in this book, there's a lot about breaking boundaries and breaking down the lines between things, and that plays out throughout the book. And I feel like that chapter, Kentucky 190, is that's another border, between the creator and the creation, and the author and the story. So that was a big part of it. And so I just love, like we talked about Gurney earlier. I took courses under him at UK, and he was a big influence on me, and a helpful writing teacher. And so, anyways, I loved in his Divine Rights trip, he does this. There's this moment.
Oh,
Yeah, there's this moment like towards the end where the character doesn't know what to do, and he gets on the phone. He's like, "I'm gonna call Gurney and see what, what we need to do." And Gurney's like, "Well, you need to get back to Kentucky for the wedding, And so he leaves California and goes back. But I love that. I
yeah.
love that moment. And James Salter's A Sport and a Pastime was another big influence on the style of this book, and that book kind of does that as well. It
Oh,
it kind of like teases that line between between writer and the story world.
yeah.
So you touched on it a little bit when you were giving the synopsis for the book, but a super minor spoiler in chapter two, we see Frank, he's in the minimum security prison and then he's not, and you don't show us this escape he makes with Buffalo the cat. And we're curious why you didn't want to show that in scene, and if you had written it, were there going to be any mishaps in it, any things that might have delayed Frank, or kind of your mindset for that missing chapter?
Mhm. Sure. I when I wrote this book, I wanted to. There were two ideas that I had in mind and two things that I wanted to do. One of them was that I wanted to write against expectations a bit, and so you have a prison break. That's kind of a cliche, right? And so, a big part of it is planning the escape and the drama of that. I wanted to completely subvert that
Mm.
because I know the expectation is there and readers have it. And so I wanted to play with that a little bit. And also I wanted to make this story really about the heart of this story. The second thing was I wanted to Frank's somebody who's lived in the under a microscope in the public eye a lot as a revival preacher and a faith healer. And I wanted to really get to the heart of the story, which was figuring out who he is when he doesn't have to play a part. And skipping past that was a big piece of that. I might even add like a third, maybe two part A reason that would be that this is a minimum security prison. It's inspired by Bell County Forestry Camp on Pine Mountain, and the truth of it is that it's really not terribly hard to walk away from because it is a minimum security prison. Most people are going to get out soon anyway. And really, what keeps you in is the wilderness because there's nothing around for a long time. And even in Lexington, like people walk away, like you hear it all the time. People just kind of walk away from the minimum security prison because there's really not a lot of you do that and you get thrown in for a lot more time. You're going to get out soon anyway. There's really more risk than reward to do it. So that all that's kind of part of it.
That's really interesting, especially because I noticed like several parts in your book where there was like a tense moment, or like him getting across the lake, to get into Canada, and like we just like bypassed that. But I did really feel like it was more about character development than the actual like intensity of the scene, and I do think it would have, for what my opinion's worth, I do think it would have taken away from like the introspection that the character is doing. So, you and I met at Bluegrass Writers Studio. We both got our MFA from that college, and so that's not something that every writer does. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about your writing style, maybe before and after the MFA. How did education maybe influence your writing? Did it? Did you said you like wrote nonfiction pieces and now you're writing this fiction book. Like, did that influence it? So kind of talk about your educational experience, if you don't mind.
When took the Bluegrass Writers Studio, when I signed up, it was a big addition or addition is not the right word. It helped me develop my writing quite a bit. And so the things that it really helped me with was I had taken courses. I was an English major back when I was younger. In my undergrad, I took, two writing classes from Gurney Norman. I took a class from James Baker Hall, and those were really inspiring. And I really love that more than like I love music and I love writing and I love reading. That's pretty much, those are the things, throw cats and trees in there, and that's me. But so I loved it, and I got out of college, and you have to do the thing. You have to find a job. I wrote obituaries. I worked in sales for a while. I went back to school and got the degree I needed to teach high school English. And so I did those things, and throughout it, I didn't write as often as I wanted to, and it wasn't something. It's something that I wanted to stick with and do, and I felt that it was. I got enough positive feedback from people like Gurney and James Baker Hall that I felt like it was not right to neglect something that I loved that I felt like I might be able to do something with. And so it
Mm.
was like a nagging thing. And going to the Bluegrass Writers Studio, it enabled me. First of all, you had to write. You had a deadline. People were going to see it. You had to make it as good as you could, and that was part of the draw for 2 years. I knew I would have that. And like Julie Hensley, who has a new book coming out, this actually I think in
It's
the
out.
next few weeks. It's out. It just came
It's
out. It
out.
just
It's
came
out.
out.
Yeah.
What was the exact date it came out?
I can't tell you the exact date, but
Last
I
few.
saw her
Okay.
unpacking it. So,
Yeah, awesome, awesome. I knew it was coming out real soon. So Julie Hensley is a fantastic writer. She was my thesis director. So this character Frank in this book, I wrote about him in this whole other manuscript. And so in short, it was the MFA was very important to me. I was 34 years old when I started it and 36 when I ended. And ever since then, and finished it in 2016, ever since then, I've continued writing and I've stayed in the routine. And Pineville Trace is my fifth book that I've written, and I've just finished a second draft of my seventh book. And so
wow.
Yeah, meeting people like Dennis Johnson and Ardeen Johnson and Young Smith and everybody there. It was really important for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I could go on and on.
Yeah.
On Everyday Writers, we love discussing the writing process. And so we'd love to get inside of your head and kind of figure out how you go from idea to debut novel. And also, you mentioned music. Does that play into your writing at all? I'm a big writer of music. I love that.
Yeah. Yes, I write about music some, so it is a subject occasionally. And so that happens sometimes. I will say there's an album that I've gotten to where I listen to it. I can't remember exactly when I started, but it's got to be like 4 or 5 years. But every time I write, I listen to it. It's Brian Eno's Music for Airports, the ambient album. And
Okay, I got to look
it's
that up.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love it. It's fantastic because you can put it on and it's not distracting. And the concept for it, he was in airports and he realized like it was just like this loud like music competing with all the sounds of everything else and people talking over it. And he's like, this is terrible. It makes you feel ill at ease, makes you feel like disquiet. And so he said, I want to make an album. He called it Music for Airports, and it's ambient music. He said you can zone in and listen to it or you can not, but it's soothing and it helps me focus, and I think it's kind of trained my brain like, okay, it's time to write whenever I hear it. And so yeah, and as far as going for from writing ideas to into the book, it's and I've talked about this a lot before, but at Disquiet, going back to Bluegrass Writers Studio, for folks who may not be aware, Bluegrass Writers Studio is the creative writing program at Eastern Kentucky University. They're a low residency program, and so during the regular semesters, you meet like kind of like we're talking right now. You meet virtually and you workshop stories and you have that, and then you have the other classes online. But then in the winter, I think now it's in the summer, but in the summer you have this in-person residency, and you have
Mhm.
the option to either do it at Richmond's campus, which they do a fantastic, or you can do it in Portugal at this writing conference in Lisbon, Portugal, called Disquiet. So I went there, and this answers your question. A writer said, one of the speakers said, write about what obsesses you. And so I thought about that a lot, and that's real critical to your question about as far as where do my ideas come from, how do they transfer into a book. I really do follow that. I try to write about what obsesses me. And so if an image comes back to me a few times or powerfully, or it seems like an image or an idea that there's something to it, or an idea for a character. The newest book, I just finished a second draft on and put it down, and I'm actually going back and revising, kind of polishing Antenna, the first book about Frank. But that book, that book, I got the idea for it. I just had an image of this, of there was this, I saw this coyote corpse on the side of the road. It was during the winter, and there was a cold spell, and the coyotes stayed there for a couple weeks and just didn't change at all because it was so cold. And and so I kept seeing it, and it just kind of stayed with me. And I thought I got an image of this young girl who went around and she would bury roadside animals that were left like that.
Oh,
And so that idea, I wrote it down in the, my writing ideas there on my phone. Sometimes, like in this book here, I talk in Pineville Trace, I talk about how I was driving when I got some of the ideas for this story about Frank, and I'll just say them into my voice memo. But that idea, I had that image for years before I came back to write that story, but it was something that stuck with me. And then when I looked back on it, I felt like there was enough energy there to 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 write something to figure out who is this girl? Like, why did she do that? Why, where would she end up? What would her life be like to make her like that? And where would it lead her? And so that's kind of a general overview of how it sometimes works for me.
that's a fascinating concept.
I had a
Um,
journal, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
One of my journalism professors used to say you have to have a dangerous curiosity for this job. And I feel like that applies to any kind of writing, that obsessiveness for it.
Yes, yes.
So the you and I very much write kind of the same way. I think yours is you come up with an idea or see some kind of vision, and I think mine come from like weird dreams where I can't really explain where they came from. But Wes, this has been so great to get all of this information from you, to learn about your journey. Can you tell people where they might be able to find out more about you, your writing, and where to pick up a copy of Pineville Trace?
Of course. So first of all, thanks again for having me. I had fun talking with you all, and I really appreciate it. So Pineville Trace, you can find it anywhere that you can find that you buy books. It should be there for you. A lot of the local bookstores and libraries have copies. There's signed copies at quite a few local bookstores. If you're in Lexington, Joseph Beth, we just did an event. Shelf Life Books is a mobile bookstore that goes to Corbin, London, Barberville, and beyond, and Middlesboro. They have signed copies. Poor Richards, a lot of the local bookstores will have it. There's also an audiobook that Michael Mao, another Bluegrass Writers Studio graduate, he went by Joey's his middle name, but he produced and narrated the audiobook, and I'm really stoked about how it turned out. It's out there, it's everywhere audiobooks are sold. Of course, the ebook is there. If you want to learn more about me, you can go to my website. It's wesblake.com, just my name, wesblake.com. And we've got, let's see, there's an event coming up with Rick Childers, and that's going to be April 13th at the Beaumont Library. And it's a Sunday. I believe it's at 2 o'clock. And so I'm really looking forward to that. Rick has a great debut book. And then, oh, I get to visit the Lexington Public Library's cat-themed book club called
Oh,
Check Me Out in the
I love
OWC.
that.
Isn't that great?
Fun.
Yes.
And it's in the Humane Society cat room.
Oh my gosh.
So you might come home with another cat.
That's the fear. Yeah. Don't tell Queek. Yeah, Queek and Pig are not thrilled about that. Yeah, so there's that. And then we've been kind of planning this for a long time, but Tom Hunley and I are doing an event in Bowling Green on April 24th at the Bob Kirby Branch Library there, Warren County in Bowling Green. So those are the kind of immediate things. But yeah, just to see what I'm up to, if you go to westblake.com, click on events. Also, if you go to my website and go to contact, and all my social medias are there too. So
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you again, Wes. This is all of our time for this week's bonus episode of Everyday Writers. If you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that bell down below, and we'll see you next time. And don't forget, every day is a good day to write.
Bye.